I wanted to begin with the halacha of a whether or not an elevator is whether one is mechuyev to place a mezuzah on an elevator. And I guess the question would be twofold: is there a chiyuv to place a mezuzah on the elevator itself, the actual elevator cage that goes up and down, and is there a chiyuv to place a mezuzah on the doorway, the entrances that are part of the building from which one walks through to enter the elevator or upon exiting the elevator?
I understand the chiyuv from mezuzah goes to anything that's used. It's not shy to let's say sleep in an elevator. So how does it go? It's same thing with the stores. I never understood this.
Okay, so the elevator. So in terms of the elevator cage, what you're saying is correct, and all the poskim say that the actual elevator itself is not meant for dira; it's meant for just to transport people or cargo to get from one floor to the next. It's not a place in which a person dwells, and so they almost to the exception. There is a tshuva in the Minchas Yitzchak where he says differently. The Minchas Yitzchak in the Chelek, I think it's Chelek Dal Siman Tzadi Gimel. That's the Marmakim, that he wants to say that the elevator itself should require mezuzah, but I believe everybody else I saw disagrees with that and says that the actual elevator is pater. It's not considered a makom dira, but so then and we'll get back to the story. It's Hashem, if hopefully later. But the question is that they deal with more is the entrances to the elevator, because those are parts of the building. Those are psachim in the building, which you use to get to other parts of the building, such as it would be similar to a beis shar. There's a halacha of a beis shar that if there's a person has an archway or whatever it means, some sort of pesach, which leads towards rooms. It itself is not doesn't open up into an actual room. It opens into a corridor, for example, or some sort of maybe just sort of ante-room which a person just uses to pass through. There's no actual dira in that room, but you move from that room to a makom dira, so that is chayiv. The beis shar is chayiv because else the cheder, else the room is the bias that it leads to. So that is the more dealt with question, whether the entrance, let's say on the first floor, the ground floor, the entrance that's from the building into which you walk through to get into the elevator, you're using that as a means of getting to your apartment. If you live in you live in an apartment building, for example, you're using it as a means to get to your apartment. And when you exit the elevator, you're walking through a pesach, a regular full-fledged, from the perspective of its construction, a full-fledged pesach, which leads you down the corridor to your apartment.
Even though it's a vertical corridor.
Why is it the corridor?
It's a vertical corridor.
No, I'm not saying the elevator is the corridor. I'm saying when you exit the elevator, you walk through a pesach in the building, which leads to the typical horizontal corridor, which takes you to your. I mean, in Florida, we have it's different. They're all outdoors, but in regular buildings, I think they have them here as well. A regular building, which is an indoor building, and you come to the elevator opens up. I mean, so here you have it outdoors, not a big difference, but it opens up into a corridor, and so there's a pesach into that corridor. So the question is there any reason why that's not called a beis shar, which leads you to your house and should be chayav also than a beis shar? That's the more, as I said, the more widely dealt with question. So some poskim say, and many poskim say, yeah, absolutely, that is the case. And those psachim, so again, not the elevator. We mentioned not the elevator itself, because that's just an object to get you from place to place. They say that's not a makom dira. It's not a house. It's not a living quarters. It's just but the psachim that open into the elevator and that the elevator lets you out, which you walk through when you get out of the elevator, should be chayiv. The Sefer Shvus Yitzchak, for example, page Chavches, he points to a Sifet Shulchan Aruch also, which seems to have a similar idea. Sif Yutem, Siman Reish Pei Vav, which is the main siman we've been discussing, Reish Pei Vav Sif Yutes, where the Shulchan Aruch says Aruba shemin bayis laliyah, if you have an opening in that from where you climb through to get from a bayis, from the first floor of a building laliyah to the aliyah is the second floor. V'olin la besulam, you climb through that aliyah on a ladder. V'osim saviv hasulam hekev mechitzas, and around that sulam, by the feet of the sulam where it's planted on the first floor, there are mechitzas around it. There are walls around it. He says, "Pam lamata baragle sulam, pam lamala baroshu, v'yesh bo tzuras pesach, b'makom she'osin so chayiv." So he says that wherever you have that structure built, you have these mechitzas around the sulam, and which has a tzuras pesach. So the Mechaber says that's chayiv and mezuzah, because that's it's like this din of Beisharetz. It's a place that from which you pass through in order to get to your living quarters. So that's chayiv. Also, because it takes you to your living quarters, then it takes on a din chayiv. It's considered a chelik of the dira as well, a chelik of your dwelling. So the Shvus Yitzchak says that's as far as where he sees it, the entrance ways that lead into the corridor from the elevator, or the entranceway on the first floor, for example, or that leads into the elevator, is a similar concept. And therefore, so he says that on the first floor you would be chayav on the right side walking into the elevator, because the first floor is primarily used to get to. If you're taking the elevator from the first floor, that means you don't. Even if there are apartments on the first floor, you obviously you're not living there, or you wouldn't need the elevator. But the elevator is primarily for people that live or that on the higher floors. So they're walking into the elevator. They're walking through this Pesach towards the elevator for that to take them up to their floor. So that Pesach, the Beis Shar, is the mezuzah should go on the right side going in, and then when you get to whatever on all the other floors, the mezuzah would go on the right side exiting the elevator, the right side of the Beis Shar heading towards the apartments. In this case, it's exiting the elevator rather than entering the elevator. And he brings this from Rabbi Yashiv as well. Rabbi Yashiv was said like this, and the way he makes it sound, Rabbi Yashiv was very, very, very strong about this, like very, very certain about this halacha. In fact, he brings there that a number of times, or there was a number of times, or a time when there was some tragic incidents happened in a particular building, and Rabbi Yashiv said, "Are there mezuzahs on the elevators there? Perhaps that's something to look into. Maybe that's maybe if there aren't, maybe that's a reason that or contributing factor." And he says there, even in terms of a bracha, Rabbi Yashiv felt he was noted that one should make a bracha. He seemed to see no reason why not. But he brings it, and in fact, in another sefer I saw, seemed to quote Rabbi Yashiv that you make a bracha on the mezuzahs on these elevator entrances, on these psachim. In the Shvus Yitzchak, he brings that in discussion with Rabbi Yashiv, so they tie it to him that, well, since there are others who say you're pater, as we'll see in a moment, so perhaps to be chashish for their shita, you shouldn't make a bracha. So he was asking that better to make a bracha on a different doorway where you're putting mezuzah and have this in mind, or simply to put it up without a bracha.
I understand the concept, but if someone lives on the first floor, and let's say they have a workout room on the fifth floor, so they go to the fifth floor workout room, and when they come down, they're coming down and exiting to go to their apartment. So would they need a mezuzah on the opposite side?
Well, I guess if that would be the only case, let's say it was a private building or something like that, and there are no other Jews living up. He's the only Jew in the building, and he lives on the first floor, and he only takes the elevator, except when he's visiting, which is not chayiv, he's using the elevator to get to the workout room, as you say, and then it's primarily it's more in terms of his dira, it's more functions the other way than in Chanami. It would be there. But the typical situation, we're talking about a building where there are a number of residents on each, people that live in it on the various floors, and but again, live on the various floors, and they're they're chayiv. So even if there's some people who are only going up there to visit, and then they use the elevator down, so when their entrance to their house is the other direction, but that's they're the minority. But maybe the situation would be even more typical. Maybe if you have a building where there are various floors, and there's one floor which has no apartments, that nobody lives in, only has, let's say, a workout room and maybe a laundry room. In fact, when I was first in my first year in yeshiva, in Eretz Yisrael in the Chavetz Chaim Yeshiva, back in the old building in Rehov Sanhedrin Sheish, for anybody who knows that or remembers that. This is back in 1976. That's when, and so the first couple of months they moved to their new building now. It's not quite new anymore since they moved on January 1st, 1977, so it's not exactly a new building, but it's called the new building. So the old building, though, was an apartment building, Rehov Sanhedrin Sheish, and it was exactly that. The first floor was the dining room, that was mostly it. Second and third floor, from what I recall, were dormitory rooms, and the fourth floor was the beis medrash. So, assuming, I suppose you could have, there could be people, I don't remember if at that time there were any of the apartments that were actually rented out to people other than the yeshiva, other than the use of the yeshiva. I don't think so, I don't know for sure. But you could have something like that where the top floor is a beis medrash or something, which we didn't discuss yet the chiyuv of beis medrash, but the primary chiyuv is the house. So maybe in the case that would be, maybe that would be, you may be right. But the typical case let's talk about is where all the floors are used for people living in all the floors, Jews living in all the floors. So let's say you have a building which is owned and occupied, or the main concern is occupied solely by Jews. So it's a shutfus, but no shutfus hakum, like we learned last week, is a machlokis. No machlokis, it's all owned by Jews. So it would seem that the residents according to Rabbi Yasha, the residents have to get together and put mezuzahs on these psachim that lead, as I said, into the elevator on the first floor and out of the elevator on the other floors. I'm sorry? Well, I think they're together. It's just joint chiyuv, so they should.
There's a prior.
If he refuses to pay, you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying if there's no testament.
Okay, so then they have to. If they can't get him to pay through any co-op board or whatever, then they'll just have to pay themselves. Like anybody who's, if you have prisoners, two Jews are shutfim in a bias, and one Jew is, doesn't care and he's not willing to pay for mezuzah, it doesn't pot to the other Jew. He may be able to take him to Beis Din and get money if that'll work, but probably the simplest thing is just to buy the mezuzahs himself. Okay, now, so Rabbi Yasha agreed though that perhaps not to make a bracha because of the chalkim. So who are the chalkim? So in this the Sefer Nishmas Avram on this siman Reish Pei Vav, and subsequently published in the Shalos and Shuvas Mincha Shlomo from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Mincha Shlomo, in the black sets Tinyana, which is the third volume, Siman Kuf Osei. Shlomo Zalman is noted that you should be butter. He said, so now the elevator box or cage itself, he says for sure is butter. But even the doorways that lead in and out, he feels that he first suggests they should be butter because he said really it's just an opening into a big pit. Because that's what it is. It's a large, the elevator, what they call a shaft. It's just a big elevator shaft, which is basically a big bar. It's not a pesach into anything. So they worked it out that there's this this electronic horse. He says that travels from up and down, and the horse waits at exactly the pesach. So you're able to walk through the pesach and actually get onto the horse, and it'll take you down. But it's not. It's not the essence part of the. Of the tzura of the binyan, the tzura of the pesach. It's not. The elevator we said is just a keli. So if the keli is there at the right time, so you could use that pesach. But he suggested that's not a real pesach. A chazal ben a pesach, even a beis shar, they meant places you walk through and you get to your house, not a place where normally if you walk through you'll be. I don't want to say what it'll be. So he suggested that's not really a pesach. That's chayiv mezuzah. No, say the elevator itself. He says it's just a keli for sure. But
I'm saying because of that, or
even the pesach. He says the pesach just leads to a bar. That's it. The pesach leads to a big, opening where nobody could possibly live. Nobody can live there. No, it doesn't lead into a makom dira. That's what he says. But he says at the end, an interesting lashon. He says, but lamaisa, the Torah doesn't say anything about pesach. The word pesach doesn't appear in the Torah. It says mezuzos beisecha. So since bismanenu, the regilus is that this is how a bayis is set up. A bayis of multi-floors, multi-dwelling residence is set up this way, that this is how you get in and out of your bayis. So maybe that's nichlal in mezuzos beisecha. Even like he seems to say, even if it's not called a pesach, but the word pesach maybe is not, can't darshan the word pesach to patim l'chayim. So he says to put out a bracha. The Nishmas Shafram, by the way, is talking. Shafram is a sefer written on medical halacha. So he's discussing hospitals there, various halachas of a hospital, and he talks about or talks about mezuzah. Mezuzah and I'm sorry, mezuzahs in hospitals, and then mainly talks about also elevators, because that's one of the places in a hospital where you may have to put up a mezuzah depending on these various shitas. So in the hospital, we mentioned briefly about hospitals last week. So the hospital, the chiyuv would be on the, if it's a Jewish owned, if it's a Jewish hospital, it would be on the owners, because they're the ones who they're using these rooms to house their patients, their clients, and the elevator are ways for their clients to get to the room. So the owners of the hospital should be the ones that would be chayiv.
If it's government owned?
Sorry, yeah?
Most of them are government owned. Does that make a difference?
Well, if the government is Jews, then I'm sure they should still.
Is it a Jewish government?
Well, it's certainly a Jewish government, but we don't have to go any further with that discussion right now. So a little bit off topic. Lamaisa also in the Sefer Yisod the Yeshurim from Rav Arnfeld, he quotes from in Ha'ar 66. He quotes from Moshe that says mezuzah's an elevator's pater. Both the elevator cage and the psachim pater. There's no explanation given there. It doesn't say any reason. It just says pater. I have written down my notes from years ago. I didn't check this up now. Years ago, I discussed this with Shmuel first, and he told me that that's the way he paskins l'maisa. He feels it's mistaba that way, and the Rabbi should paskin that way. So he tells people they don't have to put mezuzah in elevators l'maisa. I think if you go to wedding halls and the like in I haven't seen here yet, but in New York, where you have many wedding halls which are nothing else, they're just simcha halls. They're not shuls and they're not parts of yeshivas. They're just a simcha hall, and owned by from Jews, and you will see mezuzahs on the elevators. Maybe I'm not saying exclusively, but all of them. But I think it is not odd to see mezuzahs on those elevators. I think, as I said, to pay attention next time I'm there. But I think not on the elevator itself, but like we said, on the actual Pesach.
In the hospital case, it's not that it's housing the patient; it's housing his equipment.
Well, that was one story we said last week from Shalom Zalman. Maybe it's also the equipment, or there was another story that it's like, in a sense, like a hotel or motel. The Aruch HaSholem says a hotel owner has to have a Jewish hotel owner has to have mezuzah, even if his guests stay there less than 30 days. But he's chayiv because these are places that he uses to house guests. Okay, so that's the bottom line. And as I said, I do think it is pretty common in places that have mezuzahs. I'm almost positive if you go to Eretz Yisrael and you look in many buildings now have elevators. I'd be very surprised if any building that's where there are from people living wouldn't have a mezuzah. I'd be very surprised, even because Rabbi Yasha says for sure to put up. Shlomo Zalman says l'maisa to put up. Rabbi Yasha's quote is not, but I think in Eretz Yisrael probably you'll find that they do have mezuzahs. I'd be interested to hear if somebody knows what Rabbi Yasha's svars was, or I didn't really investigate that much though. Okay, now a little bit of this segues a little bit into the shaila about a mezuzah on a boat, or other forms or other types of movable, it's arguably homes, movable places where you could reside, but they're movable, because we said that the elevator itself, we said it's part there because we use the word keli, but it's mostly just to transport from one place to another. So there's a big discussion about a mezuzah in a boat. Now the discussion starts in the Shulchan Aruch, because again, here it's Mefurish, in Siman Reish Pei Vav, Sif Yud Aleph, the Mechaber says Mefurish. It says, Sukkah Zachag B'chag, V'habayis Shebesvina, a dwelling place in a boat, V'chanuyos Shebeshvakim, and stores in the shuk, P'turim, Pater from mezuzah. So one of them, the case we're focusing right now, Bayis Shebesvina, it says Pater from mezuzah. The Shach says in all of them, Ibnei Shem Diras Haroi. It's a Diras Haroi. So what does it mean that it's a Diras Haroi, a Bayis Shebesvina? So there are a lot of different svaras given. First of all, there's Yerushalmi. They quote Yerushalmi from the end of Mesechus Megillah, where it says Mezuzah Eina Noheges B'Mefarshei Yamim. The mitzvah of the mezuzah you don't find, but people that travel the seas, travel the oceans. I suppose it means people that spend their lives doing that. They don't have this mitzvah of mezuzah. And there's a Rambam that says as well, the person could end up living his whole life on a boat and he'd never be chayiv mezuzah. That's what the Rambam says. The poskim question where is the makkah for the Rambam. not sure why they don't suggest this Yerushalmi, although maybe some do. But there doesn't seem to be Mefurish a Gemara anywhere that says a boat is patur from mezuzah. So it's a discussion of where the makar is, but also a discussion of what would be the reason, what would be the svara that it's patur. Like what does it mean? The Shach says general on that sif it's haroi. So there's a Mekeres HaMishnah, which the Svarim will quote, that says the reason is because it's nayid, meaning it moves a lot now, which could mean simply that it travels. It doesn't stay in one place, or maybe also means even when it's in one place, it's not not stable. It's on the water and it's constantly rocking. I saw in the Sefer Gura Balecha, he brings on this time of the Mekeves HaMishnah, he tells Sue from the Derech Hamuna for Reb Chaim Kanievsky in one place where he says that he calls a boat is an ohel zarok. Ohel zarok, the Gemara uses expression for a oil that doesn't stay in one place. Zarok means it's thrown, basically a moving oil, and the moving oil has different dinim, like various halachas. So he's saying that by this, it's not considered a dira, even if a person lives there. It's not a conventional dira. A conventional dira is stationary in one place. A similar idea, perhaps, is the idea that he brings from the Shuvas B'Tzel HaChachma, the Agur Balecha brings from the Shuvas B'Tzel HaChachma, that it doesn't have any spot in the world. Meaning to say, the way he touches it is a makam dira isn't just defined by that the walls around you are the same, that you live in the same walls, but those walls occupy a place on the planet, a set place. If they don't, if they're constantly moving from place to place, so that itself, that by definition is called a roy. That's not again not typical bias, not a conventional bias. It's the fact that it's designed to move from place to place, and it does that. That perhaps is as far away as patur.
So a mobile home as well?
Say it again?
A mobile home as well?
Okay, so we'll see. We're going to get to that right away. See if there's any, after we've finished with the svaras, we'll both see if a mobile home fits in exactly or not. A third svar which he brings, which really sounds like a good svar, but he has a kash on it, is that typically a person on a boat isn't living there. This is touched on what you mentioned at the beginning. A person on a boat is just in the most cases is just using it to get from place to place. He doesn't want to live in a boat. He doesn't want to dwell there, even if he ends up being there for a period of time. But it's usually just a way to get from place to place. It's just a means of transportation. And the male, of course, he sleeps and eats because it's going to take long enough. It's going to take enough time that he has to sleep and eat. So he'll do that on the boat because there's no choice. But it's not like a place. A typical boat is not a place that a person goes, for a change of pace. A hotel, on the other hand, might be a punduk. A hotel could be a person wants to be in a certain location, and so he doesn't have a permanent home there, and he's not going to build a permanent home there just to be there for a couple of weeks. So he uses, that's what a punduk is, that's what a hotel is. Or maybe he's going there, sometimes a person goes to a hotel simply they just want to be in the hotel. They want people go to spend some time just as a change of pace. They want to get away from their permanent home and live in this temporary home. But a boat is a typical boat, again, as I keep saying, as opposed to see maybe a cruise ship, maybe it will be a little different. But a typical boat, person's going, it's just on there because he wants to get from place to place. Even whatever it is, he wants to travel. It's like an airplane. The person doesn't go on an airplane because most people don't go on an airplane because they want to change place. They like to spend some time in an airplane and live in an airplane. They don't want to live in an airplane. They just want to use the airplane to get them from place to place. Now, the kashi he mentions on that is that the Rambam said, I mentioned before, that a person who lives in a boat kol yamav is he patur his whole life. Now, what's that person doing? he's not. Why is he living on a boat? He's not traveling, so he's not trying to get from place to place his whole life. Presumably, it sounds like he's living in a boat. Whatever, he can't afford a house, or he has for whatever reason he's living on a boat. But he's probably not living in a boat because he always needs to get somewhere else. He's never in the place he wants to be his whole life. So it would sound like that. That would be some question on that far.
There used to be people who lived on rafts. It's a different concept. It's not a mission concept. It's not like a houseboat. Mm-hmm. That used to be and there's still people, I think, the Philippines.
Live in rafts. So the Shvus Yitzchak brings from Rabbi Yashav that he says now Mishav the Gematzav, he brings a Gemara in Tamid. The Gemara Maseches Tamid says Tamid Daf Lamed Beis, that Kol Nechusei Yama, all those who travel on the oceans, Lo Miyasva Datayu, they're not Miyushav, they don't have Yishuv Das, Ad Salkin Liabeshta. Until they get onto dry land, there's no Yishuv Das. And Rabbi Yashav suggests there's another reason maybe why you put it, because that's why it's a Dira Sarai. You're living in a place where you have no Yishuv Das. You don't want to be there. Now, the Shvus Yitzchak also compares it to well, he brings there's a Birkei Yosef that says that if a person lives on a boat even if he's there for more than 30 days, he's patur, which is the pashtas. Although there is a tshuva from the Beis Yitzchak with Yitzchak Shmelkish, who says that after 30 days a person will be chayav. This is in Orach Chaim Siman Mem Tes. But he brings the Birkei Yosef says mafresh not like that. That even if they're more than 30 days, and the Birkei Yosef compares it to a prison. Birkei Yosef says a person who's living in a prison is patur from Mezuzah, because it's not a place b'chalal that he wants to be. It's just it's something that's imposed on him. He brings also the Birkei Yosef talks about a get the word here. Just want to write down the word. Lazarito. Lazarito is? A Lazarito is a quarantine room. It talks about. He says it's a room where people when they would come to a new Medina, they'd be compelled to stay there for a period of time to make sure they weren't bringing in any contagious diseases. Sounds very similar, very familiar. But that's mamash what it was, a quarantine room. It's called a Lazarito. And the Birkei Yosef says a Lazarito, even if a person's there more than 30 days, he's patur from Mezuzah. It's not a makom for dira. It's just like like a cage. He's just being held up somewhere. Or Rabbi Yashua says, like by the base of Surin, he'd rather be in the street than it's not even like a dira that he has no other place to live. He'd rather not live anywhere, so to speak, than live in the base of Surin. So the Birkei Yosef compares a boat to that a boat is just it's not a makom for dira at all. It's just a makom that you're compelled to be for a particular purpose. You have to be there, but. And even if you choose to be there, not like the basis, you choose to be there again, but you don't choose to be there because that's a makom that you want to live. It's just a makom that you need to be. You have to exist there so that it could take you from place to place. So now, like according to a lot of these fars, a cruise ship perhaps would be different. A cruise ship, a person chooses to go on. He may choose just like he goes on to a hotel. He may dafka want to be there because he likes to be on a cruise ship, and it's very it could be very comfortable and very exquisite and first class, etc., first class type of living, and he's not being forced, and he's doing he wants to be there not just to get from place to place. That's not necessarily the idea of the cruise. Sometimes it might be, but sometimes the person might not care exactly where the cruise is going. He just wants to enjoy the atmosphere of a cruise, and even the idea of not being miyushav, not miyasmin daitai. It's possible that that's not true on a cruise ship. I would imagine people probably aren't spending a lot of money to feel not miyushav. Now, this far was said. I'm not saying this halacha l'maisa, but this far was said also legabe the din of starting a cruise within 3 days of Shabbos. There's halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, based on the Gemara in Shabbos, that you're not allowed to be maflik b'sfina within 3 days of Shabbos, because. The Rishonim give different reasons why not. In other words, if you want to go out on a boat trip and you're going to be there over Shabbos, you have to start within the first part of the week, within the first 3 days of the week. Wednesday is a machlokas, so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday for sure is okay. Wednesday is machlokas achronim. Thursday and Friday for sure not. You can't start a trip there and be on the boat over Shabbos. So why not? So one of the reason I believe is the Rif Svara, is because it takes a while for a person to adjust to the conditions, to the sea, and the person feels nauseous and seasick of the first couple of days. So we don't want you going to Shabbos feeling nauseous. So you start early enough in the week so that by the time Shabbos comes, you're already acclimated to your surroundings and to being on the sea, and you could enjoy yourself and then or at least not be sick. So I heard someone want to say as far as that this is a big shal. There are cruises that begin. Maybe it's not as big a shal by Shabbos, but by Yontif, that people go on a cruise for Pesach. From what I understand, it doesn't start more than 3 days before Yontif. They start whatever Yontif or whatever it is. So the shal is it mutter to do that? So there is a svara that some say, or that I've heard said, that cruise ships are different. The svara of the Rif doesn't apply, and they say again, nobody's paying that kind of money that they should be seasick for 3 days. LMI, maybe because it's so large and much more sturdy and stable, and I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what they say, that you won't. Or this is what was suggested, that you won't feel it doesn't have the same. It's not the same negative effect. The ocean doesn't affect you as much as when you're in a regular boat. I don't know if it's true or not, and even if it's true, to say that that's enough to change the din of Shulchan Aruch is a chiddush. I'm not saying this at all. The halacha. I'm just comparing it. Maybe legabi the boat, though, to be mechayiv you with the mezuzah in a boat. Perhaps even Rabbi Yasha's Sorah doesn't apply so firmly on a cruise ship. And also, Rashi wasn't talking about seasick. He was talking about, well, I don't know. It depends what it means. Lo miyasef that time, or maybe that's a reason for it. But it might be different on a cruise ship.
According to their Sorah, you wear like a patch. So the patch, you don't get seasick. So then it should work.
It makes you drug.
Well, okay. The question again, if the Shulchan Aruch, says that it's nothing to do. The question is, could you circumvent the din? Because also, by the way, there are other reasons. That's just the risk. There are other reasons in the Rishonim. So you have to make sure you're.
Point of reference, Rabbi Werberman, you should push label that he wrote a truth about it in Machar.
Wait, Cruz? Thank you, Cruz.
His son used to give it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Just FYI.
Okay, I appreciate it. Okay, so a lot of this, as far as now, I also I should mention the Aruch HaShulchan says that the whole din of Shulchan Aruch about a sfina, Ba'ishab sfina being pater, is talking about when it's basically aroi. It's sort of like a very temporary type of structure, but a firm Ba'ishab sfina, which is built in a much more permanent and concrete or a firm fashion, is chayav. That's what Shulchan says. Also chiddush, but so that would certainly be the case, I'm sure, on these cruise ships, and probably on a lot of Ba'ishab sfinas nowadays. Probably for the Aruch HaShulchan would be chayav.
Like the Titanic?
That's a bad example.
Huh?
Like the Titanic before.
But these cruise ships, they're huge, like 8 or 10 stories high. There's like 5,000 people on it. It's like a city, being in a city.
Like it was
I was Rosh on one point.
Oh, yeah.
They're taking they're not.
It could be an entity that they kind of special as well.
Bring my honey.
Okay, so okay, but I'm just in that this discussion, though I did see though again in the All Yeshurun brings that in note 50 that Rav Moshe held that even on a cruise ship you're pater from Mezuzah. Now, what would it mean cruise ship? By the way, it would have to be chayiv. First, if either you own it, you're the balabas, and you're using similar to the balabas on a hotel, or otherwise if you're just a paying guest, you'd have to be there more than 30 days, and we get into all the shilas of shutfus, if it's shutfus akum, and all those things. You have to take that into consideration. But let's say the more standard case would be either maybe it's an entirely Jewish cruise, which I guess probably a lot of these Pesach cruises are. I'm sorry?
You give us serious on the whole thing, no?
Or you could, okay, or and I mean it's chiras, and but I'm saying, all the people that occupy it, I mean, it's certain that there could be thousands of people there. Talking about there would have to be either exclusively Jewish, or else you'd have the tzad to be pater al shutfus akum. Okay, but so Rav Moshe says, according to the Yeshurun in note 50, that one is pater. He says the afim dar sham yosim b'shloshim yom einu eladiras arai. Why? He says hayoshi yadu umufursam. It's clear to all lakol shahadarim sham einam habaylim shel asfina. Everybody knows the people there are guests. Exactly what they are. They're guests on this boat. They're not the owners. It's not like a person that rents a house. That the here he's saying even after 30 days, it's not michsi kishlo. That's what Rav Moshe is saying. The whole svara to mechayev a socher is as michsi kishlo. He's saying this is not michsi kishlo. Everybody knows you're just a guest. So even if you're there more than 30 days, so that's so that wouldn't apply to the case if it's your boat and if you hold that the fact that your boat is mechayiv you like your hotel, so then that wouldn't apply. But for the average person who's a guest on a cruise, then according to Rav Moshe, you'd be pater anyway. So you asked, well, what about a mobile home? So a mobile home also might have some of the svaras of a boat won't necessarily apply. Some of them would, but a mobile home, the question is, what is it being used for? Are you there just to get from place to place, or no? It's a form of vacation also, maybe to go and people. I think people have these mobile homes. They like to use them from time to time, and just to get away from their regular home and to live there. It's not like a b'di'evid that that they need to get from, they need to need someone to stay while they're traveling, because they would do like everybody else. They would find a motel room for a night. But it's more like they B'davka want and enjoy living there and using it perhaps as a motel room. Okay, they would have to be there more. Well, they own it, but even so, it's stum of the deer would still be considered dira sarai, even if they own it. But it's the deer by definition is probably considered dira sarai, so it still might not be chayiv unless they were on a trip for more than 30 days, but that could be.
And that's apply if someone owns two homes and one's a vacation home that they only go first week in July, the rest of the year they're not there.
And they don't leave anything there. They don't go there at all.
Well, they leave things there,
what?
And same too with the mobile home. People leave their pots and pans and bedding and sheets.
I see. Okay, so that's as far as they do. If people do leave things there in Chadami, so but still, even if they leave things there, but they don't go there more than once a year, like they go in July for a week, every year, and that's it. So that would probably get into what we said I think last week or whenever, that is still probably, that wouldn't be called the Beis Osa. Beis Osa has to be that it's a place that you store things that you go to and that you use, and at least with a certain degree of frequency. So that might not be a sort of chayvim. So then, then pashas, they would be potter the time that they're not there. It's not being used by anyone. It's sitting empty. They're just there once 1 week in the year. Now that week, most of this poskim say for that week in the year they would be chayiv though, because then when they're there it doesn't look aroy. That's not aroy. It looks it is near a kavai shlo. It is his house, and it could easily look like his house. It's much more so than a guest on a boat, and in terms of the kfiyas rather than a ride, much more than a mobile home. So then they would be chayiv even if there's less than 30 days. But the mobile home, there are chuvas that say that a person who owns a mobile home and is using it is chayiv mezuzah. I'm sorry. So we mentioned this last week. It's a
timeshare means you own a week of the year of the year, but you manage own it. There's a fee of to keep the thing going.
Right, but the rest of the year you have no rights to go there.
No rights, but you own the zman of the dir.
So you own the zman, but like if all the people together get together and sell it, or it's like an outside party that actually owns the physical.
You own one, whatever, 50%
of the actual four walls.
Yeah, I'm saying that there's all contractual stuff that makes it how it's managed, but in the Maisa you own that.
Question is that like the guy who owns the house that he goes to once a year? Because
with the guy who owns it once a year owns it fully. Here he only owns 150.
Right. Okay, but let's say they're all Jew again. They're all. I mean, Ba'ishal Shufin is chayiv. If they're all Jews for sure, and even if they're goyim, we said it's machlokas. So I have to think if that's any different. The place itself could be any house here on the street, and it happens to be it's owned by
Usually it's not like Orlando or some vacation stuff. They go there for vacation.
Right, but it looks like any other house.
That's like a house, yeah. Sometimes fancy.
Right. Okay, so it could be that during during the week you're there, Mustami Yichai. When you're not there, not. We mentioned last week, certainly if they're there, they certainly should take it down when they're there. But even when you're not there, Mustami you'd be potter. But calls when you're there. Okay, so that pretty much covers the boats, the mobile homes, the elevators. We didn't get to the stores, but maybe we'll save that for next week. Well, what I want to try to get to now is we spoke a lot about different places. This place, Chayav not, but I want to start next week discussing halachas have to do with like where Mezuzah goes, like between two rooms, or between your house and your backyard, or exit doors, things like that. In terms of to determine where Mezuzah goes, I mean which side the Mezuzah will go on, and those types of things. And then hopefully we'll get to structural questions, what's the structural chayim and stuff. So maybe we'll just discuss the stores next week, and then move on to, as I said, the next aspect of these halachas.